So in Brazil, it's been an interesting couple of weeks. There's a couple of things that have been happening. One, Lula has been doing interviews, and in addition to restating the fully political nature of this case, it's demented. Hassan Madri, who I think has a show on Netflix, did a segment recently. I haven't watched it yet, but it was, shown to me basically he going rightly to attack Bolsonaro's plans to destroy the Amazon, which is a threat to every human being on the planet. Again, he just uncritically repeated that, Dilma was removed for financial crime, serious financial allegations, even though that even at this point, sort of even mainstream media sort of admits that her impeachment was completely baseless, and just repeating. I mean, if you read any piece in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, they'll say Lula's at the BBC, Lula's in jail for corruption. At the very least, a fair, legitimate report would say disputed charges orchestrated by a prosecutor who now serves as justice minister in the current government. He's been doing interviews. He's been actually articulating very well the failure, the catastrophe of Bolsonaro's first couple of months in office. Now there's an investigation into Bolsonaro's son emerging about with actual real charges, with material evidence having to do with potential money laundering charges for millions of dollars. Bill de Blasio rejected basically Bolsonaro coming to New York City. He's been in Texas where he was greeted with protests, and now in just just a hugely, the type of thing that not only is hugely significant, but we need to learn from in the age of Trump and the age of all of these horrifying bills targeting women being passed in places like Alabama. People have taken to the streets to protest the Bolsonaro regime, Bolsonaro government's war on education. This is a continuity of the austerity that started as soon as Dilma was removed from office. But this is also specifically trying to get rid of sociology and philosophy departments. So there's a huge ideological component of this. We have video here. Brian Mayer of Brazil Wire and Telesur should definitely be following Brazil Wire and Brian Mayer to understand all things that are happening in Brazil. Look at this mass amount of people on the streets in Brazil. Incredible result. And as of this video, he said, I think it was a 200,000. Now estimates are that there are up to 1 million people striking to defend education. I'm going to quote a little bit from a piece on Ion Latin America by Fiona Edwards, who's also a good journalist on this stuff, based in the UK. The National Confederation of Workers in Education described the day of education strikes as a quote-unquote warm-up for further mobilizations against this and other aspects of Bolsonaro's austerity offensive that threaten to impoverish the Brazilian people and undermine Brazil's national economic and social development. The next big anti-austerity mobilization is planned for June 14th, 2019, with workers preparing for a central strike against Bolsonaro's proposed attacks on pensions, which is currently being debated in Congress. Bolsonaro's project is to dismantle higher education by starving universities of state funding as a first step towards opening the door for full privatization of the education sector. Now, this is so crucial because, of course, rightly, we put a lot of attention here on his homophobia, his misogyny, his racism, which are massive and relentlessly documented. His literal neo-fascist background. He was a captain in the Brazilian military junta that the term neo-fascism was coined to describe. But these attempts to gut pensions, to destroy labor unions, to privatize public education, these are the reasons that the Wall Street Journal endorsed a full-on fascist candidate for the presidency of the largest country in Latin America. This is the ideological impetus for the war against the social movements in Brazil, the war against Lula and Dilma and the Workers' Party, and the way the Western and Anglo press has worked hand in glove with U.S. foreign policy and U.S. corporate interests to put this catastrophe in office. Remember Ian Bremmer? Ian Bremmer is one of these, again, these horrific mediocrity Davos soothsayers in the, in the Fareed Zakaria, Thomas Friedman mold, sort of. And there was a great piece on him in the Baffler. I forget who wrote it, but it came out a couple weeks ago. Everybody should read it. And he runs a risk consultancy called Eurasia Group. And, his job is to advise banks and advise corporations, and then, pontificate on CNN about how somehow we can get back to, because all of his arguments always lead back to, well, there's this huge rise in right-wing populism, and first of all, let's make a false equivalency. Let's do what John Oliver did, and I don't know if Ian Blemmer's done this, but I would be shocked if he didn't. Do something as ludicrous as comparing Trump and AMLO. And let's just get back to stability. And stability always somehow means opening countries up for foreign direct investment, austerity, and then a form of kind of basic social moderation. But of course, actual things, are potentially negotiable. If you look at another figure like this, Tony Blair or Hillary Clinton, they're quite willing to negotiate on refugee rights, as an example. So he wrote a piece in Time magazine where he called Bolsonaro was his nominee for Person of the Year. And in perfect symmetry, he literally he said he had toxic masculinity, which, like, if ever there was your signal to maybe consider retiring that phrase, it would be Ian Bremmer deploying it in the context of giving himself plausible deniability, because he knows how disgusting Bolsonaro is, and he knows that things like Bolsonaro saying he'd prefer to have a kid die than be gay, and that there's potential links between Bolsonaro's family and the gang that assassinated Marielle Franco, which I'm sure Bremmer doesn't even think about. But he said he also might be the person to finally reform Brazil's economy. And what does that mean? Because when Michel Temer came to power after the totally illegitimate process, the judicial congressional coup that removed Dilma Rousseff from office, he immediately started gutting the achievements that Lula and the Workers' Party had put in place. And what that meant was that Brazil, which had been taken off of the UN hunger list, went back on it. And as Lula said last week, he said, look, there's a bunch of people in this country's elite want this country to work for about 36 million people, which might be generous. And he said the rest are just a statistic. They don't matter to them. It doesn't matter if they starve to death. It doesn't matter if their bodies are misshapen. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that a young person like Lula, who grew up in extreme poverty and worked his way as a metal worker and lost a finger doing it, they don't care. And Ian Bremmer doesn't care. Ian Bremmer is there to do kind of intellectual shell casing around the ruthless march of neoliberalism, which is willing to negotiate with fascists like Bolsonaro. Brendan, what were you going to say?
Oh, just that Ian Bremmer also just this morning said that he would rather vote for Howard Schultz for president than Bill de Blasio. So
well,
he's really on a hot streak.
Yes. I mean, Ian Bremmer is very bad, not good.
He's a charlatan.
He's a charlatan, folks, and not bright. And Bill de Blasio, look, he's running for president. That's a joke. The idea that you would, contribute $1 to him and not to a fund to fight to protect abortion in southern states is obscene. And, I don't know whether he's just delusional and wants a vacation, or whether there's something more cynical about, a new way to wring out bucks from the real estate industry. In the last couple of years, he's mayor and get some consulting contracts going. But credit where credit is due. He told Bolsonaro to basically that he was, garbage and not come to NYC. So Bolsonaro went to Texas, and this is where I want to do a trigger warning. This is going to be one of the most horrifying, disgusting, stomach-churning pictures you will see ever. That's right. Jair Bolsonaro and Ted Cruz. That's Heidi Cruz. I think that's Jair Bolsonaro's wife, but I'm not sure.
She looks like Callista Gingrich.
Yes, she does. Sorry. Sorry if you're eating. This is evil, folks. It doesn't get more evil than this picture, folks.
Yeah, psychopathy doesn't get more glamorous than this.
Actually, it really does. But, again, I want to reemphasize, this is the depths of humanity, but the heights of humanity are that the Brazilians are out there striking. The landless workers movement is still going. Lula is roasting this guy from prison, totally undaunted after being a political prisoner for a year. So we should have solidarity and we should learn. And we should also, as we measure our choices for president, be thinking extremely attentively about our global footprint. And that's why I do want